Hello, everybody. How's it going? Good.
Good.
Good. Good.
Do you want me to find him?
If you could, that would be awesome. We'd love to bring him in
Yeah.
the cavalry. Well, great. So this panel, well, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Ben Stockdale. I'm with the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association in Raleigh. I do government affairs there, so I'm a lobbyist for clean energy. I'm working to advance clean energy legislation at the General Assembly, working on executing Governor Cooper's initiatives as it comes to clean energy, and making sure that the good stuff moves forward and the bad stuff stops. So I'm glad to be moderating this panel today. The title of this panel is Renewable Energy Policy and Infrastructure. So we're getting in the weeds, we're getting down in it, we're going to talk about some clean energy initiatives. We got some awesome guests joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. So I've got some cool bios. I'm going to read a bio, you're going to give applause, and then I'm going to read the next bio. So let's do this. To my left is Mr. Rocky Boldo. Rocky Boldo is the president of Power to Choose and Enough Technologies, born and raised in New Jersey on the other side of the stone edifice of the Thomas Edison estate. Rocky has been working his way into the heart of the energy industry since he was a wee 13. From installing hi-fi displays at Roberts TV and appliances to AT&T's plant engineering department until he founded the audio-video innovative design company. Rocky believes that zero carbon footprint hours could provide a free market reward for taking personal responsibility to harvest a little energy, then save a lot. Rocky, welcome to the panel. Let's give it up for Rocky! All right, next up, to my right, we have the wonderful Steffi Roush. Steffi is a web designer by trade who spends all her spare time, including her spare time today, leading the Asheville chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby that is laser focused on getting bipartisan federal climate legislation passed, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. She also leads the nationwide 999 bottles of beer on the wall campaign that is an effort to get breweries speaking up for climate by signing a brewer's climate and carbon pricing declaration and meeting with their congressional representative to discuss climate solutions. In her free time, Steffi loves to drink beer, hike, garden, paint rocks, and hopes to build an earth bag hobbit retreat one day. Give it up for Steffi Roush. And to my far right, last but certainly not least, is Ned Doyle. Ned Doyle is an energy activist in the Western North Carolina region, currently serving as co-chair of the Technology Working Group on the Energy Innovation Task Force, which has developed a unique community energy collaboration between the city of Asheville, Buncombe County, and Duke Energy. Ned began his sustainable career in the mid-1970s. Whew. Moving to Western North Carolina in 1979 to work with the original Mother Earth News magazine on their 600-acre eco-village research project. Ned hosted and produced energy-related radio segments for more than 10 years, and from 2001, through 2010, coordinated the Southern Energy and Environment Expo in Western North Carolina, the largest and most attended of its kind in the Southeast. In his spare time, Ned likes to read about sustainable efforts and work in his organic garden. Everyone, welcome Ned Doyle to the stage. All right, so we got about an hour, so I want to get some perspective on this. I want to, everyone comes to clean energy from, hey Kathy, good to see you. Everyone comes to clean energy from a different perspective. So I want everyone just briefly to talk about how you came to clean energy and what your unique perspective is on energy.
You want to start?
Ladies first.
Oh, goodness.
All right, ladies first, he said. All right, so I moved here from Montana about 11 years ago. And I was with a conservative family that had grown up in Montana their whole lives, was in the lumber industry. And we would hunt and fish. And we noticed, of course, their family who'd grown up there their whole lives, they were noticing the snowpacks were depleting. And as conservatives, you would think that they wouldn't acknowledge this, but they did. I mean, because they're hunters and gatherers and fishermen, they definitely welcome. noticed this, and I had some interesting dialogues with them, and eventually I broke up with my boyfriend and moved back here, and saw that we have lots of water here. And after coming from a very drought place with lots of fires, and then seeing us go through that here a couple years ago during a summer with a very long drought, and then seeing the amounts of flooding that we're getting in between, obviously this started to pique my interest. Like, this is probably one of the, I think it's the number one issue of our time that we need to solve. And so I got involved through many different environmental groups, and one day someone wrote an email to 350.org and said, this group, Citizens Climate Lobby, seems to really have their, excuse the French, shit together. And maybe we should listen listen to this Wednesday night intro call. And so I listened, and I was amazed that this particular group has a real strategy. And it's to get federal bipartisan legislation done, meaning we need to get both sides on board in order for it to be sustainable. We need sustainable energy, but we also need sustainable legislation. And so they are amazing. They have conservatives on their board, they have progressives on their board, they have scientists on their board, they have military on their board, their advisory board. They have a sure strategy and lots of great support. And so I've been loving being a part of this group, and we have a bill in Congress that has been introduced in a bipartisan way, and I'd love to tell you more about that.
Awesome. And before we keep going, we got our last and final guest here. I'm going to introduce him. I'm super excited. He's our keynote speaker for this entire event, so we're so lucky to have him. He got driven in on his private golf cart, so that was pretty sleek. So electric. So nice arrival. That was pretty cool. Pretty cool coming in fashionably late. David Freeman was one of the architects of the EPA during the Nixon administration. He was appointed chairman of the Tennessee Valley Authority by President Jimmy Carter, and after 7 years at TVA, served subsequently as CEO of major public utility for 30 years, including Lower Colorado River Authority, New York Power Authority, Los Angeles Department of Power and Water, and Sacramento Municipal Utility District. He has written and lectured extensively on energy and the environment and is the author of the influential book, A Time to Choose. He has also authored Energy, The New Era, written in 1974, and Winning Our Energy Independence, An Insider Shows How, written in 2007. His latest book was endorsed by some people like Robert Redford, Ralph Nader, President Jimmy Carter, and T. Boone Pickens. Let's give a loud, warm welcome to our guest, David Freeman. Welcome. The cowboy, the green cowboy. So the question that we're asking is, how did you come to clean energy? So David, could you just talk us about how you came to clean energy?
Yeah. In 1967, I had this awesome position I was in the White House.
That's all right.
Lyndon Johnson named me to, quote, coordinate energy policy on a government-wide basis. I had a staff of 2 people. I didn't know doodly squat about a lot of it. I had worked at the Federal Power Commission before, and I had done a little bit of work. But I was kind of for everything, And 2 women from New Hampshire, and I'm just so sad that I can't remember their names, called on me. And they were opposing a nuclear power plant up in New Hampshire, and they had the data. They had done research, and they showed me that by putting in more efficient light bulbs and putting in insulation and just a few things like that, that you would save more energy than that nuclear plant would ever produce. And it was like, if I can be so trite as to say, it was like a light bulb going off in my head. And I said, is this for real? And they showed me. And all of a sudden, on the basis of the lobbying by 2 intelligent women, I might add, I became one of the first people in the federal government to understand and advocate energy efficiency at the end use. And then I went on to get funding from the Ford Foundation, where me and a woman named Judith Pagosi, who's here in the audience, and a few others did a study, and I picked people that didn't know, if I can use your word, didn't know shit about energy. Because I just found people that had a good record in school and were smart, and we studied it, and they came to the conclusion that efficiency is not only real, that it was the lowest cost and cleanest and huge source of energy. And when we finished our report, I made one decision that I'll never regret, and I sent a copy to the governor of each state. One of them was the governor of Georgia. And so don't assume that people from backward states, if you want to think of them that way, are dumb. I mean, he read it, and it became his energy policy, and it was a result of that study that he named me to head the Tennessee Valley Authority and implement it, and we did do that. So I relate that hopefully to give everybody here a little bit of encouragement that you've got to try, and you've got to approach people, and don't assume that they're owned by the bad guys, and don't assume that they're dumb, but just persist. And I think the example that I've seen of it lately is a very controversial young lady named Alexandra Cortez, who just very calmly, with the Green New Deal, is saying, we're going to try, and then we'll try again, and then we'll try again. And as she puts it, I'm 29 years old, and I'm going to be here a long time. So get used to it. We're going for broke. And my friend and I here are going to have an interesting debate, because the climate issue is not one that is susceptible to a compromise. I mean, we're either dumb deniers or intelligent deniers. But unless we really believe what the climatologists say and act on it, and do the things that the climatologists say we need to do to avoid burning up the only home we have, then we're wasting time. And so I am going to have a healthy conversation here with people that think that this is a baby that we can split, that we can do halfway measures. That would have been good 15 years ago, or 10 years ago. But either you believe the climatologists or you don't. And I know what this country was capable of doing when we got hit by Pearl Harbor. We weren't Democrats and we weren't Republicans. We were Americans. And Americans do things. Americans identify the problem and solve it. Like Jack Kennedy said, we went to the moon not because it was easy, because it was hard, but it was the government that took us there. The government funded NASA. So the government can either be used to solve problems or not, but we've got to work together to solve the problem. And it's not like issues like healthcare where there are legitimate differences of opinion about how to go about it. We know what the enemy is. It is fossil fuels, and it's bad agriculture, but it's primarily fossil fuels. And unless we decide that we are going to put the oil and gas and coal people out of business over the next 10 to 15 years, starting now, then Mother Nature doesn't even know what we're doing, and we're wasting our time.
Thanks, David. Ned, do you want to talk about how you got involved with clean energy?
Sure. 1, 2.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
You're
that's
loud
how.
enough. Yeah, go ahead.
How about if I do it this way?
Yeah!
It's
There
good
you
too.
Off the grid!
The summary explanation, and I watched Jimmy Carter's moral equivalent of war speech on a black and white television live at the time. So, and when I go, one of those little sidebars, when I grow up someday, I hope to be Dave Freeman. So I got a ways to go here, but I started then, moved to North Carolina in '79, as you noted with Mother News, and actually got paid to build solar homes, to build solar systems, to build earth sheltered homes, to work in sustainable gardens and so forth. And from the very beginning, it was like, this makes sense. It wasn't so much as some huge revelation, but it was just an obvious thing we had to do. And that was a long time ago, relatively. And so my work and take on it is, and I'd hope to share more on infrastructure between Steffi and Ben and Dave here in terms of policy. I'm all on board. I defer to them. I won't go over that again. Listen to them on that. But I think the important part for y'all to take away here in terms of getting some action, getting off the grid, first you have to define what the grid is. All right? And in, again, summary, I've got 12 hours on this topic, so I'm really trying to cut it down. Right now, the grid problem is it's centralized energy with dirty sources that are not sustainable. And there's two basic aspects to the grid structure today: the generation and the distribution. It's the generation that's the problem. That's the issue. And that's where solar comes in. And that's where getting rid of coal. This is where getting rid of the nukes come in. It's the generation. The distribution is something different. That's another, now there needs to be a modernization of the grid. There is work that needs to be done there, so I'm not just giving
I'll address that.
Yeah, and Rocky's gonna talk about microgrids, that's leading into
And
that.
smart.
But it's being done.
Right, it's moving in that direction, but I'm throwing this out again, is think about it that way. It's not getting off the grid really, it's transitioning to a modern, distributed, sustainable, clean energy grid. Because the microgrids can be as small, arguably and philosophically, as your cell phone, and you go right up to utility scale. A home is a microgrid. All these different examples. So you don't necessarily have to get off the grid. If you put enough solar panels on your home to go net zero, you are doing a bunch to transition the grid at that point. And that's what I work for. And the last little bit here is that it's not enough, it's not fast enough. I'm frustrated, but Western North Carolina is a remarkable example of the ability for the city, the county, and the utility to actually work together to push through energy efficiency programs for low income, on the ground. Sophie Mullinak's with Blue Horizon Project is here. I think she talks a little later on. She represents that. And we've been able to push through. They're way behind. I'm really trying not to be too negative. But to push them to put in standalone battery projects, the last utility in the country that is actually doing this. But at Rock Hill, Mount Holly, Hot Springs, and a number of sites, our group has pushed Duke ahead of the league to do that. So there's ways to make it happen. And the last part about it is that we need to save ourselves, the planet, and the bugs will, listen to Dave Freeman on this. It's a crisis. The Achilles heel, but also the ultimate opportunity promised to me is the sad fact that they're only in it for the money. This is where the power, it's all economic. They don't care about the climate. They don't care about these other issues. We don't care about the children. I know that's a broad statement. Individually they do, but collectively they don't. So, appeal to that. Let them steal the money for solar and clean energy, and when we take care of the environment, then we'll go back and shake them down for what they stole. Let them steal the money. Let that transition go through, and we will move forward at that point.
Rocky, how'd you get into clean energy?
Hi, everybody. Rocky Boldo, International Electrical Technical Commission expert on direct current system standards. Excuse me, sir?
Behave.
Excuse me, sir? Thank you. Let's give homage to the men and women who built the power grid upon which we are 100% dependent on. Almost all of us. Who is not 100% dependent on the power grid in this place?
25 years off grid.
Oh, who is not? Who is not?
Who is not? Who is not 100% dependent on the centralized power authority for your electricity? So we got, how many counted? Less than 10, right? Okay, and this is amongst the group of elite folk who really believe that we should be doing this. Now, we have to understand that smart grid build-out is happening, and it's a wonderful thing. I come from plant engineering. See those things? They're called telephone poles. Why are they called telephone poles and not power poles? Because telephone was the first distribution of electrical signal in the world. The telephone system is a direct current power system. So, what's happened is, since the advent of the transistor, and since the advent of the photovoltaic, which makes battery power, the Bell solar battery was introduced to the United States in 1954. And that was the chip that we depend on to harvest energy today, the silicon chip. They knew what they had. They had a device that would convert photons, sunlight, into electrons to be put in a battery or put to use. And that's what the Peace Crane is. The Peace Crane is a direct current device, end to end. So, we all understand that alternating current is the #1 source of power, correct? And the power company, the subsidized monopoly, is the undisputable master of alternating current, correct? You can't beat a subsidized monopoly. But what you can do, and I'm not trying to make things bad or make the grid bad. The grid is a wonderfully essential thing. We're just trying to make it better. Because what's going to happen is, we're already in the middle of smart grid built out, and that's a wonderful thing. But the grid was not originally designed to be fed from both ends. It was designed that you were going to come from the supply and come down the transmission lines to the substations, then meet your needs, and it wasn't designed to be fed back that way. So one of the issues that we have in too much on-grid solar, because if you put conventional grid-tied solar on your house, if the grid goes down, you have no power. You're not off the grid, you're on the grid. You bought a power plant, and you've given you the ROI, the return on investment, to a central monopoly. Now, what my standpoint is, and I understand and respect and want the monopoly to do what it must do to keep civilization humming, but I want to make it easier on them. So what Power to Choose does, it gives you the ability to harvest the energy given to you when it's available to you, use it there and then, and store some for the evening, and then buy power at night. Because you cannot store alternating current without converting it to battery power. You can't store it. Now you can use there's like pumped hydro where you pump water uphill, but somehow or another, once you fire up a nuclear power plant or a coal power plant or any other steam pot, and they're all steam pots. This is a steam machine. Let's face it, we're in the 21st century, fully dependent on a centralized steam authority. What I'm trying to tell you right now is if you harvest just enough to deal with your carbon footprint in the Internet of Things, just your digital devices, just your LED lights around the house, that could represent up to 20% of your personal carbon footprint. Right? So efficiency is the key. The cowboy is absolutely right. The grid is absolutely being built out. I'm not arguing with any of that stuff. What I'm saying is, I believe that we as citizens have two types of power. One, as a citizen, that we get to vote once a year, or we get involved, as our fine panelists are, trying to deal with public policy. And the other is as consumers. As we walk into the appliance shop, think about buying something that has a DC plug on it. Right? Because if it has a DC plug on it, it's probably going to be rated Energy Star. And when you buy a new refrigerator, or washing machine, look for inverter base. And guess what inverter base means? It means it's got a DC motor in it. Duh. And before very long, within the next few years, right now we're already at DC air conditioning. So we can perform what I describe as thermodynamic jujitsu. The heat and light that would penetrate your roof and suck the air conditioning out of your house can now be captured on photovoltaic cells and then used to air condition your house. I do it every single day, and you know what? I don't always drive on sunshine, but when I do, it's in an electric car. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. All right, so this panel is primarily about policy and infrastructure. Like I said, I'm a lobbyist, so I work with energy policy every day. Right now, we're kind of at the tail end of the legislative session in North Carolina. I know we have people here who have federal policy experience, state policy experience, local policy experience. So if I could get your perspective on which policies you think are needed to advance the clean energy future, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. Maybe Steffi, if you want to start with talking about what policies you've been working on.
Yeah, great. I do want to preface this. I think all of us have different ideas of how we need to handle the climate crisis, and everyone works in different ways. And I respect that, and I think we all should respect each other for all what we want to do in our different ways, okay? We believe at Citizens Climate Lobby that politicians don't create political will, they respond to it. That's what we believe, that the people have to become engaged again. People are not engaging. In fact, I've talked to more people on both sides of the aisle that are basically bowing out of the process. And they're saying, well, why should I call my congressman if he won't listen to me? Well, is that going to help further the conversation? No. So we're not here to have a debate. It's not a debate. I say all hands on deck. All hands on deck. And that means whoever gets this done gets it done. And we need lots of solutions, not just one. It's just that our federal solution, which also is a global solution, is one that can encourage people to change their behaviors on a personal basis, businesses to change their behaviors, banks to change their behaviors, innovators to innovate, banks to invest, producers to move to clean energy faster, and grow the economy, jobs, and GDP while cleaning up the air and water. Why would we not want that? And getting both sides of the aisle on board. So,
Can you go into depth about the actual policy?
Right. Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividends Act is the name of this federal policy. It has been introduced into the House at last legislative session by 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. This legislative session, we lost 2 Republicans, unfortunately. We're down to 1. But it has grown in Democratic support in the House to 60. In the Senate, it was introduced by Coons and Flake, the last legislative session, and as you know, Flake, one of the more moderate Republicans, has resigned. We are waiting for it to be reintroduced. Unfortunately, I have to say, as much as we wish it to be paired, like we did the Climate Solutions Caucus in the House, where we grew 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats in this caucus, I have to say that personally, I believe that with this administration, I don't see Republicans stepping out at this moment because they're afraid that they will get their heads cut off. But that just means more, that speaks more to the point of politicians don't create political will, they respond to it. And so we work on getting endorsements, we work on writing media stuff, we work on tabling presentations and getting people on board on both sides of the aisle. So this legislation, just so you can preface that understanding of the bipartisan part of this, is the fact that we want to price carbon out of the markets as a pollutant, as it is, but give that money back to the people as a monthly dividend check. This has been implemented in Canada nationwide as of this year. Everyone is getting a monthly dividend check today. A 4-person home after 10 years would get about $300 a month. After 20 years would get about $400 a month. When people have money in their pockets, what do they do with it? When they have more disposable income?
I spend it.
Right. We spend it mostly, apparently, and they've done studies, or we paid for $1 million study called by Regional Economic Modeling Inc. that shows that it would grow the economy, jobs, and GDP. And how it would do that is in a lot of industries like healthcare, retail, food, beverages. That's why we're trying to get the breweries on board, because when people have more money in their pockets, what do they do? Go out to the breweries or winery, or buy more coffee, or go buy more food at the farmers markets, or go to the doctor because they couldn't afford it before. So when we talk with conservatives about this, we say, and there's certain verbiage I will use with conservatives, we say this is a market-based approach. It's an alternative to regulations. It will help grow our economy, jobs, and GDP while cleaning up the air and water. It pays for itself with low admin costs. And it's the strongest, most comprehensive reduction in emissions out of any bill so far to be legislated. We are proposed, and this has been studied by several different entities, that we will reduce with this carbon pricing idea is that we will reduce emissions to 40% by 2030, and you know the goal is 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050, and the goal is 100% by 2050. That is the strongest, most comprehensive across all the markets legislation to reduce emissions so far to be proposed, and the only bipartisan bill to be proposed.
Thanks. David, you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me enthusiastically support your basic idea that we have to avoid this complacency, and we can't assume that we can't win. Obviously, if we don't try, we're certain not to win. And I admire your enthusiasm and passion for trying to make something happen. Having said that, if what you're peddling is, even if enacted, doesn't get the job done, you may be doing more harm by getting people to put all their energy into a measure that Mother Nature is not going to notice the difference of. Because I can tell you that I have looked at all of these ideas about putting a tax on carbon, on energy, for 40 some odd years. When I worked for President Nixon, we couldn't get anyone in the Senate to even introduce a bill to put a tax. Bill Clinton, with all of his political power, confessed to me personally one day. He said, I tried to get a tax on energy and I failed you, Dave. But put aside the political problem of whatever you want to call it, it's still a tax. There is no tax that I've seen proposed that is going to have any impact today that would move people who wouldn't otherwise do so to buy an electric car rather than, or to put solar panels on or anything else. The level of the taxes that you're proposed, certainly it will encourage, it will make some difference, but the hour is way too late to put all of our political effort into measures that will only help a little bit. We know what to do with stuff that's poison. We know that the fossil fuels are poisoning our environment, and we need to use the force of law to pass simple laws. All new power plants have to be zero emission. As of a certain date, all new cars have to be zero emission. All new homes have to be zero emission. We pass laws to do collectively what we can't do individually. And you know damn good and well that no matter what the price is, there are a certain number of people that are going to continue to buy gas guzzling, fancy big cars. People are not going to retrofit their homes and stop using natural gas. You have to realize that the principal problem we've got is not the electric power industry. It is the use of oil and gas. That is the major source of greenhouse gases. And quite frankly, the bill that you have will do very little to reduce the use of oil and gas. You have to outlaw it. It's poison. We ought to be, you should use your passion, your expertise, your skill, your knowledge to be proposing laws that will outlaw, 1 year at a time, these things that are poisoning our environment. And anything less than that, if you enact it and people think you solved the problem and you haven't, you're doing more harm than good, in my opinion.
So the premise is something, by the way, when you call it, so the sole purpose of a tax is for government to use that revenue, correct? Would you say that the sole purpose of a tax is for government to use revenue for services, right? We're talking about a revenue neutral solution. So revenue neutral carbon tax is what some people call it. Some people call it carbon fee and dividend, like Citizens Climate Lobby. Some people call it a carbon dividends plan. The premise is, just like with cigarettes, Some people stopped smoking because they felt it was a health risk. Some people stopped smoking because we taxed it. And just like actually what President Reagan, who I'm not a fan of, but I have to say he said something very wonderful that we should listen to. You tax the things you don't want in the world, and you subsidize the things you do. We can do this, and this is widely supported by top economists who basically signed the largest public statement with every economic advisor to the president since Ford on both sides of the aisle supported this. This is something that's supported by the U.S. mayors, or the Conference of Mayors. U.S. Conference of Mayors signed an endorsement of carbon pricing. This is recently a health statement by 70 organizations signed an endorsement in support of carbon pricing. There are now 5 large religious groups, including the Catholic bishops and the Pope, who've spoken out saying carbon pricing is the way to go. There are huge amounts of support for this, including from the energy companies and the banks, who've asked for a carbon price to fix this market failure. To just learn more about it is what I implore you all to do. I understand his concern is based on some history that I was probably not born around to know. But I have to say, things are changing. And if we can use this in a way that gives money back to the people with more money in their pockets to encourage them to change behavior and move to clean energy, why should we not do that and get Republicans on board? Why should we not do that? That's what I think you should ask yourselves.
When people smoke, they're killing themselves. When people drive a gas-guzzling car, they're killing all of us with climate change. There's a fundamental difference between the problem of smoking and the awesome problem that civilization is facing from having built a greenhouse in the sky that is warming the planet and causing climate to damage us more and more. We've got to stop burning fossil fuels starting right now. And the truth of the matter is, if the purpose of a tax is to simply tax and redistribute wealth, well, that's fine. But don't tell me it's an answer to the climate problem. It's not.
Ned, do you want to win?
Yeah.
You got yours. You got 2 minutes.
Well, this one definitely works. There's a little trouble with the other one. Then I took it because it started to rain. At the risk of getting everyone angry with me, both of them are right. I concur with Dave totally, and I also appreciate and understand where Steffi's coming from. The carbon tax dividend is not the answer, but it's part of a solution because we have to deal with economically. And in a general sense, in terms of policy, and we're seeing this emerging around the country. That is a little back, for 20 odd years ago, I was a board member for the NCSEA, and I've also worked and consulted with Duke Energy and so forth, so I try to have a holistic, view on it. In terms of policy, where we are in North Carolina especially, but emerging nationally, I think the real focus needs to be in decoupling generation from distribution. And in North Carolina, stop that. In North Carolina, we have a complex situation with a monopoly that basically calls the shots. And they make their money, derive their revenue, get their guaranteed income based on selling kilowatt hours. This is the standard structure. And up until about, in my view, about 15 years ago, it was actually a pretty good way to work things. It made sense. And they're taking revenue at X amount, and they say, well, how do we pay for the power lines? How do we pay for new power plants? How do we, blah, blah, blah. And they work it into the rate base. And it was simple and relative. People would understand, well, I got to pay 5 cents or whatever per kilowatt hour. Well, today, as I mentioned earlier, there's a huge distinction, and there should be, between generation and distribution. And again, trying to move forward, provide an economic incentive for the utilities to make money, pay their bills on distribution services, not just on generating, not just by the kilowatts. So there's varying ways to look at that in different services, but think of it in terms of the solar panels on the house. You've got it, okay? You're generating all this electricity, you're putting it back into the grid at nighttime. I'm talking about no battery system, I'm off grid. And then at nighttime, you take the power back in from the grid, and if you do it right, you net meter out, and you come to pretty close to zero. It's all clean, it works great, and it's fun. Well, bear with me here, but we really need to pay the utility system something to manage that electricity back and forth. If you think of the utility infrastructure as a battery itself, there's value to that. There's value to the energy that we're putting in and saving. And it's not just the fake, is the word I use, avoided costs that we're only going to pay it. No, there's avoided costs for generation, there's avoided costs for carbon, there's avoided costs for health issues, there's avoided costs for a whole range of social issues that add up dramatically to make it worthwhile. So in terms of policy, what I push for is people to understand that if we can decouple distribution from generation and then allow a profit margin on distribution, well, okay, we're getting somewhere now, because right now it's changing, and North Carolina is like the last caboose on the train here. So there's plenty of examples in the rest of the world, but as it is now in North Carolina, so they get guaranteed returns for building a power plant, whether they ever go online or not. What a good gig. You go out there and build a house. Well, it might fall down, but I'm still getting paid for it. Nobody may move in, I'm still getting paid for it. It does not make sense to do it that way anymore. Investing in distributed generation between residential, community solar, also utility scale solar. And here's the factoid for the policy here, Ben, you could probably give me better numbers on it. They say North Carolina is number 2 in the nation for installed solar capacity behind California, and nobody's close. So that's the whole thing. Well, that sounds really good, but for all practical purposes, counted by megawatts, Duke and Dominion own them all. It's utility-owned solar in North Carolina. Yeah, there's rooftop. There's, it's out there. I'm off-grid, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at the bulk of it, that policy, everything that's in place in North Carolina with the North Carolina Taliban, stop that. In the legislature, they make some bad decisions. Let's try to switch it over to there. It is utility, and they literally are looking to own the sun in that sense. And yes, on one hand, it's like, we need the solar. Utility scale has merit. Yes, I understand that. It's not like don't put in solar, but they are opposed to residential solar and reasonable fair net metering. Ben, you can probably carry on this with more detail. They're opposed to community solar programs. They're fighting over the nitpicks of how to make money off it, which, don't be sad, but we need a full-scale assault allowing this transition to go and do it economically and environmentally in terms of our mind for ourselves and future generations. So as Dave and I are getting into our golden years, I might say, we're turning this over to Steffi and Ben and the next generation to try to keep it on and move forward with better policy. So fight for decoupling, fight for clean energy policies and distributed energy in whatever form to get there. And that's one of the things that CCL does with the carbon dividend. It moves it in that direction on a larger scale.
Thanks, Ned. So, when I'm working in the legislature and when we're advancing policy initiatives in North Carolina and federally, we come up against party opposition. There's a lot of Republicans who support solar, support wind, support renewable energy, but there's a fair amount of opposition at the legislature when it comes to renewable energy, and there might not be opposition, but there's not a lot of support on the right now. There is legislation like House Bill 589, which passed in 2017 in a Republican legislature. So there are still gains that we can make. So the question I have for our panel is, and particularly for those who are working on lobbying right now, how do we communicate the benefits and importance of clean energy to conservatives who might not necessarily have this in their platform, clean energy in their platform?
It's cheaper. It's lower cost. Are you for the consumer or against the consumer? You just hammer home the fact that we've invented a lower cost source of power, and you're opposed to it. You're crazy. I mean, it's not, we don't have to make all kind of arguments about, even about the environment in favor of solar power today. I mean, you can install, and you know it, you can install solar in community solar or local solar and beat the hell out of the price that the utility's charging at retail. And they're trying to discourage that. And you just need to tell the members of the legislature, this is not a political issue one way or the other. This is a question of whether you're for the consumer or for the utility. And of course, they're being paid by the utility, and they're probably going to keep voting for the utility. But if enough people tell them that we're onto your game, buddy, your vote is bought and paid for, because forget about climate, forget about all these arguments about doing good. This is a question of what is the consumer going to pay for. There is not anybody that in the legislature is going to stand up and be in favor of higher rates for consumers. So I think if you just focus on that issue and not try to persuade somebody that doesn't want to believe in climate because they're afraid that they'll get kicked out of the Republican Party if they do, but they're not going to do that. But the issue of price kind of gets lost sometimes in trying to make our do-good arguments, I think. And now we've arrived at a time when you can just show them the numbers. You can put solar on somebody's home at about 5 cents a kilowatt, with the cost of money being what it is. If you could just put it into the mortgage of your house, you can do the numbers almost on the back of your hand, and it's about 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And it's cheaper than what the utilities are charging.
So at CCL, we believe that you have to show people that what's good for us is also good for them. You have to kind of pull them in, right? We're in a very controversial time right now. And when you try to tell people that they're wrong or that they're crazy or that they need to think differently and get into this debate, do you think that you're going to make friends with them? No. Usually it ends up going down a rabbit hole and we end up parting ways and we don't have a good conversation. I have literally turned Republicans at happy hour with a beer. Just by learning how to speak their language. It is a language. I grew up a hardcore Democrat, loved Carter. My mom campaigned for him for many years, and I have to say that I was always confused by why they thought differently and didn't understand them. And now I'm at the point where we have conservatives in our chapter, in fact, one that leads the conservative caucus nationwide. And we are literally like family. And we are working towards the same goal. And this is a solution that not only has conservative values to it, but also progressive values to it. And so if you have something that has both sides to it in the bill, and can actually, it's not income redistribution, by the way. So there's a lot of arguments that we avoid through this legislation. Everyone gets an equal amount of this dividend check. But when you give the equal amount, like 2/3 of the people, 60 to 70% of the low to middle income people have a lower than average carbon footprint. And when they have a lower than average carbon footprint and they're getting a dividend check back that is the average carbon footprint, just think about that. They're going to get back more through the dividend than they'll pay in the fee. So they will be more well off. So talking and learning how to speak with people who might not agree with you and asking them questions about their concerns and why they think the way they do, and then addressing those concerns and asking questions to help them come to their own conclusion, it's called motivational interviewing techniques, by the way, is what we're taught to do when we lobby. And it works very well. In fact, we've met literally now 6 times with Congressman McHenry, who knows me by name, and 15 times with Congressman Meadows. I don't know of any environmental group in this local area that has met with him that many times. Do you know who McHenry is? 4th in line in the GOP deputy whip, right? He counts the votes. You know who Meadows is? Head of the Freedom Caucus. So they're very high up GOP. They're not easy to talk to, believe me. So if we can do it, I know you can do it. You just need to be educated in how to do it if you want to learn.
Explain how that's going to overcome the utilities' efforts to discourage and stop decentralized solar. I don't understand how your bill is even relevant to that. I mean, the subject we were talking about just now is that the utilities in this state are actively charging fees and taking positions that inhibit their customers from putting solar in them. I don't understand how your discussions with Meadows or anyone else even raises that subject, much less does anything about it.
I can respond to that, but I'll let him.
Well, coming back to your original question, because we've got enough material here for about 12 days, I think. But coming back to how do you communicate with them, and I think it's sad, is my personal opinion on it, it's economics. It's only the money. When you're dealing with the conservative mindset that has these opinions, and I'm not trying to be divisive, but we all know people like this, the thing that matters the most to them is the money. The economy. That whole picture, that's what it is. And people say, well, you don't care about the children. Well, that's not necessarily true. They just don't care as much about the kids as they do about the money. So, and it's about the economics in dealing with these issues that is the wedge for the conservatives. And I'm not as mature as Dave is, but I remember when, oh, you hippies with the solar and all this, so you guys are crazy. We were doing it because it was the right thing to do. Right, we're getting there, and and all this, and it's gotten past the point of people doing it for the right reason. It's cheaper, and you can do it for the good reason. And I wanted to wrap this up because, Glenn, were you on the bus with us for the tour, for the visit down to, was it Savannah, for the public hearing? We had like 60 people on the bus going down to this hearing to protest and testimony. This was 10 years ago. She's been on more than I've got beard here, so she's been on there. But they said, no, would you talk to the people on the bus as we get there to pump them up to go for this hearing? I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And it was just kind of a moment where it hit me. And I said, driving down the highway, they gave me a microphone on the bus the driver used. And I said, when we get to this testimony for the public, don't talk about the children. Don't talk about radiation poisoning. Don't talk about the legacy. Don't talk about social injustice. Only talk about the money, the cost. That's the only thing you're going to get to. I almost got thrown off the bus. What about the kids? It was a great set, but it was true. And I got a lot of bad feedback from it. But, you know what? What killed the nukes? The cost. They don't care enough about the children. They don't care about Chernobyl. They don't care about Fukushima. They don't care about the waste problem other than as a source of income. And this is in the new picture here, but they do care about the revenue. And so we're in, as Dave has pointed out, and Stephanie is going to, we are in a golden position to invest in the future of a clean energy grid that actually makes sense environmentally and economically for everybody. You guys should. And so there's a handful of people left, visually the CEO of Exxon and the rest of them, but virtually everyone benefits with a distributed generation clean energy grid. It costs less and you make more money off it. So there's something for everybody in there, but you have to separate it out.
I just want to read a letter from some of the largest energy companies in the world. This was a letter to the UN. And they wrote, for us to do more, we need governments across the world to provide us with clear, stable, long-term, ambitious policy frameworks. This would reduce uncertainty and help stimulate investments in the right low-carbon technologies and the right resources at the right pace. We believe that a price on carbon should be a key element of these frameworks. If governments act to price carbon, this discourages high carbon options and encourages the most efficient ways of reducing emissions widely. Let me just explain how this works. Let me just finish. Yeah, let me just finish. So this was by BP, Shell, Statoil, Total, ExxonMobil. And the reason why, let me just explain this to you, because I think people have a hard time understanding how this works.
Only too well.
So basically, there is right now a market failure, right? We are not paying the true cost of what carbon is doing to society.
We're using poison. That's what it's saying.
Could we be a little respectful of each other at this moment? We are not paying the true cost of what carbon is doing to society. We are paying on the back end with floods and fires and sea level rise, where municipalities and people and businesses are paying those costs. But we're not paying it in the things that we buy. We're not plugging the hole in the boat. We're putting Band-Aids on the boat. And we're basically shoveling the water out. That's what we're doing. We need to change that dynamic. The reason that energy companies are still selling fossil fuels, even though they wrote this letter, the reason why is because they're subsidizing we are subsidizing our government 4 times as much for fossil fuels as renewables. And if the cost of fossil fuels is lower than the cost of renewables up here, then they're going to continue to sell. They're not going to change their ways. What we're saying is raise the cost of fossil fuels, make it more expensive, price it out of the markets, tax it, kind of like cigarettes, because people won't just change because they want to be a do-gooder. And when they get hit in the wallet books, they will change. But then renewables will come down, so it changes that dynamic and gives them a pathway to move. It gives them a pathway to move. That is the point of how that works. So it incentivizes them to change their ways, and it gives them predictability of the markets in order to do so.
With great admiration for your passion and great respect for the sincerity of what you're saying, if you'll indulge me in using harsh words, you just flunked Economics 101. Because if you incorporated the true cost of climate damage, it would be such an astronomical number that it would be the equivalent of outlawing it. The sums of money that you're proposing as a carbon tax doesn't even come close to in any way internalizing the loss of life as we know it on this planet. So even if I accepted your fact that we have to solve this through the marketplace, which I don't, but even if I accepted that and took your theory, you're not practicing what you preach. The numbers that you're proposing as a carbon tax, they tried it twice in the state of Washington and defeated it. It amounted to about 20 cents a gallon on gasoline. Quadruple it, and it still wouldn't come close. Can you imagine what the number would be if we tried to emulate what the cost of climate damage is going to be? It's already in the hundreds of billions of dollars. It is an astronomical number. So if you're going to practice what you preach, first of all, they'd be proposing that all the subsidies for fossil fuels be eliminated immediately. And the day that Shell Oil and Exxon propose that, it'll be a cold day in hell. But put that aside, the amount of money that you're proposing for the carbon tax is a pittance compared to the real cost of it. So if you're going to practice Economics 101, you've got to have a number that is so large that it is the equivalent of outlawing it. So why not just outlaw it?
Thanks, David.
One year at a time. We have the technology. If I'm sitting there and owning a whole bunch of oil in the ground and a whole bunch of refineries, let's get at least smart enough to realize that you cannot expect a private company to be Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam has to be Uncle Sam.
Right, that's what we're saying, but yeah, okay.
So we are going to be closing up here. Got the.
Yeah, anybody from the Canary Coalition is here, ready to speak?
Is anyone from the
you ready to
Canary
go?
Coalition
Okay.
here ready to
Cool,
speak?
they're next.
Okay, we got the next lineup. Canary Coalition. Stay tuned. So the last question that I want to ask is, looking forward on the work that you're doing, what are you most looking forward to? What are you most excited about? What do you think is coming down the pipeline? Can you give us a little bit of insight into what we might expect the next 5-10 years that you're working on right now?
I have fallen in love with AOC. I think the Sunrise Movement and the young people, my grandchildren, get it. They're not any smarter than anyone else. The answer is very simple. We need to outlaw the fossil fuels and pass laws to do that in an orderly fashion. And I think that it's going to take time. The question is whether we'll do it soon enough. But the future belongs to the Sunrise Movement and the young people that understand it and are not afraid to try. I mean, the most persuasive speech I've heard in a long, long time was at Howard University, where there were 1,000 young people and me. And AOC got out there, Alexandria Cortez, and she just said this. They all say that the Green New Deal, which will outlaw fossil fuels, is too much. And in their head, they're right. And they're saying it can't be done, and they're right in their head. But we're going to try. And then we're going to try again. And then there are going to be more and more of us as we become of age. And we will overcome. We will stay with us until we win. And that's what's inspired me, and hopefully will inspire everyone else here. Because we cannot dare settle for laws that won't get the job done. When we know that it's very simple, straightforward laws that outlaw something that's poison over time, and we have the technology to replace it. That's what breaks my heart, is that I never thought I would ever live long enough to see ads for electric cars, heat pumps. We know how to use renewable electricity to replace all the oil and gas, and it'll all be cheaper, and it will put millions of people to work. And it's the equivalent of going to the moon here on Earth, and we can do it. And all we need to do is decide that we've got to do it. And if you view climate as somebody with a gun to your head that's going to kill you unless you do it, then you'll start doing it. And we did it after we got hit by Pearl Harbor, by the Japanese. We stopped making cars altogether. We made 100,000 airplanes and tanks the next year. We didn't fool around with the God blessed tax or any indirect measures. We as Americans did it, and we can do it again.
We didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We're going to leave the Petroleum Age because there's something better. Let's get it in, everybody.
All right, so I don't think we're that far off from each other, and that's why I don't really understand why we seem to think that, like, telling someone that their bill is not going to work when actually
it won't work.
We've made the most headway out of any legislation. Again, this is not something he's saying it's not going to work, but we've done studies.
What are you looking most forward to?
That show, yeah. But I do want to reiterate that it honestly will reduce our emissions the most out of any legislation, and that's what they're saying. And that has been proven through reports. So I want to reiterate that, because that is something he said that it won't, and that's untrue. There's been studies that show this.
Mother Nature hadn't seen it.
So, whatever gets it done, all hands on deck here. Okay, so let's talk about next 5 years. So again, we're still pushing for our legislation to gain co-sponsors. In order to get more co-sponsors, you have to get endorsements. We need to work to that end. I have to say, I don't think that we're going to get this done in this congressional legislative session, as we know, because we have a president that will not move forward. But we are preparing in the next 2 years for that to be pushed at the next Congress, hopefully. And we need help. We don't have enough volunteers who are active in our chapter. We are all over this nation. This is something that is now being talked about worldwide, by the way. It's being talked about at the UN. Ireland is now talking about implementing this Canadian policy. I think I can't remember what the other countries are, Don. Norway. Yeah, there's several countries that are talking about implementing a carbon dividend solution. And by the way, 57 countries worldwide have implemented carbon pricing. In fact, it doubled in the last year from 25 to 57, and we will see that continue to rise over the next 5 years. So to say that it's not being done, that it's not having an impact is ridiculous, because with 57 countries covered by a price on carbon and now China coming on board, they're saying that we'll cover 25% of emissions worldwide. And that is by the World Bank. So in closing, I'm just going to say...
The population is still increasing, and while you're reducing the overall per person, as the population still rises, you still have this giant curve.
Yeah, so we increase the carbon price every year by $10, so it's not like it stays. So it starts low, giving people time to adapt, and then raises over time. This is something, like I said, that is being talked about around the world. So I'm going to just say the next 5 years, we are looking to get this legislation passed. And we need more help. We need people to get endorsements. We're very strategic about our endorsements. We know what committees and caucuses our congressmen are on. We look at getting those endorsements to appease them. Congressman McHenry is the vice chair of the Small Brewers Caucus. Did you know that? 1 of 4 in the nation. And half our Congress is on the Small Brewers Caucus. Can you believe that? They all like beer. So that's why we started this we did 99 bottlers of beer on the wall. We met that in June. We gave it to our legislators when we lobbied them. And now we're working for 999. There are 6,000 in this country. If we get 1,000, we could get the Brewers Association hopefully on board and get them to lobby Congress on it. So that's just an inkling of what we do. I hope you want to become involved. I encourage you all to get engaged in whatever way you feel comfortable doing. If you support AOC and the New Deal, do that. If you support our legislation, do that. If you support being on the corner, holding up a poster, do that. Do whatever it is that you want to do. But let's be positive and let's be supportive of each other, not telling another person that they can't do what they want to do. Thank you. And we have a table, by the way, near the entrance. We're like 4th or 5th from the entrance. So please come by and see us and read these letters from the top economists and the energy companies and the banks and environmental groups that support us. Thank you so much.
Ben, I believe the question was, what inspires us moving to the future?
Then at this point, you could say whatever you want.
You don't want me to do that, plus we're being recorded. But relatively to that, I find great inspiration in beer. Now that you mention it, Steffi. But in a serious and also hopeful vein, my inspiration at this point, because I've been I'm no Dave Freeman, but I've been at it for about 45 years myself, and is the youngsters, the kids, the next generation. And there's a couple of them here. You guys are right on the edge of it. You're about grown up. It's not us old geezers. It's Steffi, it's Ben. It's the younger people that I have hope for, that hopefully I can inspire to pick up the baton, the torch, however you want to look at it, moving forward. There's no technological barrier to us going clean, whether it's energy, whether it's oil, whether it's food, whether, you know, get on the list. There's no technological barrier that we haven't already solved, or it's right there. There are challenges. There are roadblocks. There's speed bumps, yes. But take technology off the table. It's a matter of your heart. It's a matter of motivation. It's a matter of morals. It's a matter of just humanity to move forward with these changes. That's really the bottom line. And I've had, all in all, I've had a great life. I can't believe I'm still alive. That's how good it's been. You know? But what about the kids coming up? You know, and I use the term loosely, Ben, you're, you know, right on the edge of that too. These are the people that are going to be in charge. These are the ones that have to live with the consequences of what Dave's been talking about since his morning keynote and now, and we're here. It's the same thing I've been working for. So that's what I hope inspires, I can inspire others to move forward. And it's from experience. It just, I've been the co-chair of the Technology Working Group for the Energy Innovation Task Force for Western North Carolina. They get paid for how long the name is. That's the only thing I can explain it with. They get paid by the syllable. But what we did, and it was a collective effort, Duke Energy announced they're going to build 2 natural gas-fired plants and a peaker plant running and close down the coal. Real great story, long story, stuff like that. Our group got together by pulling together the people, the community, the customers, Duke Energy, and the governments here, and the peaker plant is off the table. It's pushed off 10 years. It's
For that. That's awesome.
We did that. When I say we, this was the community in Western North Carolina who did it and demonstrated Blue Horizons project. Sophie's coming up. She's young. She's right on that edge too. You know, they said, look, we don't need that peaker plant if we implement these energy efficiency programs right now. We did. There's more to go. It's not done. The Duke said, oh yeah, well, you know, that does. Their IRP pushed it off 3 times in a row, and now it's off the table. Now we're pushing them to go, how do we get storage? How do we get solar? How do we get this microgrids, distributed generation going? And the answer to that in so many ways is the economics of it, because you're only doing that. And I'm just about done. That's the last little story here to try to connect up to your head to inspire it. Just imagine in the United States, if no one gave loans for cars, how many people here could actually just walk down to the dealership and peel off cash and buy a new car? Well, don't raise your hand, though. Well, look at you, you've got that much money. Yeah. Nobody. It's all based on funding. But with solar, wind, and these technologies, excuse me, I'm too excited, you have to pay up front. The bottom line is it's financing. I have people tell me, oh, well, solar doesn't make sense. It doesn't pay me off. I don't have a good rate of return on this. It's just not a really good. It takes 7 years to pay a system off. It varies. Yeah, but then you own it and it runs for another 21. Well, no, it's just not a good return. And they turn around, they walk over to get into their SUV they paid $50,000 for, lost 5 or 10 driving off the showroom floor, spent $20,000 a year gas maintenance, overhead, and insurance, and so forth. And in 10 years, it's worth nothing. And they're telling me solar's not a good idea. Whew. So, if we can get through to the kids. Excuse me, I'm too excited.
Thanks, Ned.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you all. So, thank you very much. And I want to give a quick plug to a podcast that I have. I work for the Sustainable Energy Association. We have an energy podcast. It's called the Squeaky Clean Energy Podcast. It comes out every 2 weeks. Just interviewed Governor Cooper. We've gotten Google, Microsoft, JP Morgan. We got a lot of interesting stuff there, so go check that out. And let's give a very loud round of applause to our panelists today. David, Stephanie, Ned, thank you so much. And Rocky, thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. Go out there and do something.
Go ahead and come on up to us, ask us some questions, and hope you have a great day.